Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the different games that we just didn't have a chance to get to yesterday. Definitely wanted to highlight some teams as we get into the off season. Definitely a lot of teams that had some really incredible years, but were just a little bit overshadowed. So I want to give them some love really quickly. Illinois, Duke, a lot of those teams that did a really incredible job this year. But let's get into these. Definitely a very interesting rankings today. A lot of different movement after a crazy week 14, but I feel relatively good about this one. First, I'll get this out of the way to start. Miami is my number 16 team. They are a little bit out of this list. I was not super high on them going into this weekend. The defense proved me right, and they proved me right really the entire year. So they're right on the outside looking in. Maybe if I didn't put a G5 team in here, they could have been that 15 spot, but my 15 spot is going to be Boise State. I think I flirted with Tulane just a little bit. I was misled just a little bit by Tulane. I absolutely love that team. I think they're still a really great team, but they stumbled this past weekend. Boise State does take their spot here in. They have the best running back, one of the best players in the country in Ashton Jeanty. They have a defense that can really get after you. And all the craziness that is Ashton Jeanty, we have totally forgotten just how good this defense is. This team is absolutely for real. A win puts them in the CFP, maybe even gives them a bye, and then you're in a position where maybe you're a little bit rested playing a team that might be a little bit roughed up. It's one of those formulas that could benefit Boise State. I don't necessarily expect them to go on a run in the playoff, but definitely a team, when you have that player on the football field, a lot of things can happen for you very quickly. Iowa State's my 14 team. I think this is a team that just does not get enough love, if I'm being totally honest. I think this team plays really, really efficient football. The defense gets absolutely after you, and they have difference makers on the outside. They have that duo that I still think could be one of the most impactful duos in the entire this upcoming weekend and into the playoff. I think they're one of those teams that has that next gear that they can hit. Maybe they'll hit it this weekend. Just got a little bit of great news that we'll talk about here in a second for Arizona State, but they're in a position where they win this weekend, they're in the playoff regardless of where they're positioned. I think they're a dangerous team. I don't necessarily think they're going to be able to outright match up with a lot of the teams that they're going to play. I do think they can go around you. I do think Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel are a mismatch against just about any team in the country. South Carolina, I have at 13. I love this South Carolina team. I really, really enjoyed watching them. The back half of the season, they've been one of the very best teams in the entire country. They lost too many games early. And I hate to say it, I have to lean on head-to-head. There are so many different things that have happened this past little bit with South Carolina and these next two teams I'm about to talk about that I just got to lean on head-to-head. So it's one of those things that if they put in South Carolina tonight, I'd be more than fine with that. But I just couldn't quite do it. I don't necessarily think they're above these teams because when you lose to those teams, you just have to be below them. That's the way that I look at it, and I have Ole Miss here at 12. I think they're a team that is really just in a weird spot, if I'm being totally honest. I don't think they're necessarily in a position where they're likely going to find their way into the field. They're probably playing a bowl game that they likely don't want to play too much, and it'll be interesting to see what happens this offseason. Obviously, this was the year that they put a lot into, and you missed the mark just a little bit, but definitely a lot of momentum still around that program. Just quite a bit of work to do in the portal this offseason. Alabama at 11. I know this is going to make people mad, and it's going to make people mad tonight when they're in the 11 position, but that's just the way it works out. I think with a 12-team playoff, we're learning more and more. Maybe that's too many teams, but at the end of the day, I think they're a team that has played elite football at different times this year. They are a team that has played not so great football at different times this year, so it's going to be a fight back and forth. I understand both arguments. The way that I see it, they have 4 top 25 wins. They have win over South Carolina. I have to give them the lean right now. I think you could argue South Carolina, you could argue Ole Miss with me, but I'm going to lean on head-to-head, and I'm going to give Alabama the slight edge over Ole Miss as of right now. Arizona State here at 10, a lot of things to like about this Arizona State team, and they just continue to get better. The issue that has just hit them that we talked about a little bit earlier, Jordan Tyson is going to miss the Big 12 championship with an injury. You hate to see it. A really, really talented player, and we talked about it yesterday. When he came into the mix, that felt like when this offense really took off. It felt like when they became one of the more dangerous attacks in the country. Not having him on Saturday is going to be really, really tough. It's going to have to be the Cam Scadaboo show, and we'll see what happens there. But a lot to like about this team, and they've been a team that's kind of defied the odds. They're probably going to have to this weekend against Iowa State. SMU here at 9, a really, really good team. I think I've made my take known about SMU. They are really good, and they should be in regardless of what happens this weekend, or this system is totally dumb. Now, the system is already dumb. I think we already understand that, and I'm not necessarily holding my breath for them to let SMU in if they were to lose this weekend, but this is a very special team. Kevin Jennings, when he took over, has become a really, really incredible player and could become a little bit of a college football legend in the next month or so. Definitely will be interesting to watch what happens this weekend, and then whatever they do in Selection Sunday if SMU were to lose this weekend. Indiana here at 8. This is a team that has done an incredible job. I think they don't necessarily get the love that they deserve because a lot of people have problems with their schedule. A lot of people have problems with different things. I'm sorry. I've watched a million teams lose to inferior teams this year. I've seen a million teams stumble when they shouldn't have. Indiana hasn't, and that's kind of just plain and simple. There's a lot of teams on this list that you can't necessarily point to that marquee win. You also can't point to that really bad loss, and I can for a lot of the other teams on this list. So Indiana is a great team. I think they're very firmly in the mix for the CFP, and then they just got to see what happens. I think they're probably going to be traveling in the first one, so just got to continue to prove people wrong if you're Indiana. Tennessee here at 7. I think this is a really, really good team. I'm still holding out a little bit on them. Thought about moving them a little bit higher, but couldn't quite do it because I'm still worried about that pass game. They found it a little bit on Saturday. I've seen it in flashes throughout the season. Haven't quite seen it over a couple of weeks. We'll have to wait quite a bit to see that. I do think the playoff obviously will be their next game. I don't know if they're hosting or going somewhere. It'll be something we're watching for tonight. But this D-line and the explosive offense, very dangerous combo, and definitely one of those teams that if they were to get into the mix, especially hosting a game, could be a very dangerous team in the CFP. Ohio State, I'm putting here at 6. I understand dropping them lower. I understand dropping them down to 7 or 8. I genuinely am looking at this as they have a Michigan problem. They have a very specific problem with that team in maize and blue that they won't have in the playoff. Now, I do think the O-line is going to be an issue. I do think Will Howard not necessarily being able to downright take over a game could be a difference in this season. So I have my worries about Ohio State. I'm not necessarily throwing that Michigan game totally to the side. But I do think not seeing that maize and blue on the other side is going to make a difference for this team. I think they're more than fine. If they were to host a playoff game, I would be more than fine with that. And then I think they'd be a really dangerous team once they got there. It'll be interesting to see how all that unfolds tonight. But as of right now, I think Ohio State, you're not great, not by any means. You're in a better position than a lot of people are giving you credit for. I still think this is a very good team. I just think they have whatever problem they have with Michigan right about now. Notre Dame here at 5. They look like one of the more confident teams in the country right about now. There were rocky moments at times on Saturday, but they're a very, very elite team. They're able to absolutely travel in these road environments and play really good football. That defense is a little bit up and down, or it was up and down on Saturday. Not necessarily been up and down all year. Definitely been one of the more talented defenses in the country. The Benjamin Morrison injury is definitely something I'm watching very closely. It's been a fairly obvious absence from him, and definitely a player that gives a lot to that defense. So I think Christian Gray's done a great job in his absence. They're definitely going to have a couple of big-time battles with some really good wide receivers in the CFP, so definitely something to watch. That being said, they might just have the best player on the field, no matter who they play. Jeremiah Love is absolutely incredible. He does things that athletically I didn't know was physically possible with pads on your shoulders, but he can do it. He's absolutely incredible, and definitely one of those guys when you have that type of playmaker and that type of defense, you can do a lot of special things. It'll be really awesome to see what this team can do. I still think there are a lot of people holding out a lot of questions about this team, but as of right now, they're playing really good football, and that defense is one of the very best in the country. Georgia here at 4. They are absolutely flawed, and we saw it on Friday. I would understand dropping them below Notre Dame here. I couldn't quite do it. I think they're as dangerous as a team as there is in the country. I think when you look at the top level that they've been able to play at different times this year, it's been a little bit few and far between. I'm not arguing that, but there's definitely been moments where they played about as good a football as really anyone in the country. That Texas game, really that Tennessee game for much of it, they played really, really good football. I think they're still a dangerous team. And I think with Carson Beck rolling, I think this defense just needs to lock back in. I think they're a very talented group. Obviously some issues that weren't there in the past years, but definitely still a group that I think can tighten it up. I think can play good enough football. And then if that offense can pick up the slack that they weren't early in the season, I still think there's a team that can absolutely win a national title. Obviously some issues that I didn't think we'd be talking about with Georgia right now, but they're still in a very good position. And as long as those receivers can catch the football, they're in pretty good shape offensively. Penn State here at 3. They're the team that I think all of us are still questioning just a little bit, but I think they're good enough to win a title. I think when you talk about so many different of the teams this year, you're saying there's not quite a national title team, and they're not in other years, and I understand that. I think Penn State, if you take them back to last year or 2 years before that, they're almost definitely not a national title team. They're not playing the teams of last year. They're playing the teams of this year, and there's no elite team around the country. They absolutely can win this thing. I think they're in a position where you take care of the ball and you take it away on the other side the way that they do really, really well. Maybe they're a dangerous team that can possibly make a little bit of a run. Maybe it starts this weekend with a win over Oregon. Texas here at 2. This is the team that seems to be rolling to me right now. Obviously, that offense is not quite as explosive and crazy as you really want it to be. The run game is very, very effective. With Trey Wisner and all those running backs, the offensive line is imposing their will. And then you also have a ton of other things on defense. I mean, when you can play that level of defense and when you can run the ball to that level, you're going to be able to do a lot of things. I don't think there's any team in the country that is going to be able to outright stop them in the run game, outright be able to score 40 points on them or anything crazy. They're going to be in a lot of these games. As long as Quinn Ewers can continue to just slowly scale that performance, I think they're in a really good spot. And I think we saw it on Saturday in different moments. He's definitely ready for those big-time moments. That second quarter was really incredible football. Third quarter left a little bit to be desired, but as long as they can avoid mistakes, this defense is going to get them in a very good position to possibly win a national title. And then Oregon. They're the best team in the country. They continue to prove that every single week. They're really only 1 week. Since week 3, that was truly ugly. It was the Wisconsin weekend, and that made total sense. It was 8 straight games. It was the third time on the road in 5 weeks. It made sense to me why they were struggling a little bit there. They are complete. They're a really great team. The season just started for them. It just started over. They are officially 0-0, and they got to play Penn State and then possibly be in the driver's seat for a national title. This has been an incredible, incredible job from Dan Lanning. I think we all understand, though, you can go 13-0 all you want. You lose that first playoff game, it's a disappointing year. So it's definitely been an incredible year for Oregon thus far. The work just kind of got started for them. But that's my top 15. As it stands right now, I think there's a lot of questions around Alabama and where they should be, around maybe Miami and where they should be. I dropped them a little bit out of my list just because going into this weekend, I was a little bit worried about them, didn't necessarily love them as a team, but they continue to win games, so I put them up there. I just couldn't do it anymore. I don't think this is a Miami team that really has the ability to scale the way that I wanted them to. I think they're a really capable team. The more that I look at them, the more that I see 2023 LSU, where you have a remarkable quarterback, a remarkable offense, and you leave just way too much on the table. So it's one of those teams that I'm more than happy to talk about it and kind of go back and forth. I definitely think it's one of those debates that's going around Miami against those SEC teams, but I just couldn't quite do it. I definitely think they're a really good team, but it'll be interesting to watch what happens tonight. Maybe my rankings are just on. Maybe my rankings are all the way off. Maybe Notre Dame will jump a couple of teams. Maybe Ohio State will fall a little bit further. It'll be interesting to see what happens tonight, and we'll talk about it tomorrow. No doubt about that. But that'll do it for this edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It does make a huge difference for us. Also, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, all the social pages for all the content and updates you could possibly need. We have great people doing great work across every sport you could possibly want. So anything in the world of sports you need, come on over to GSMC and we have you totally covered. But thank you once again for listening, and I will be back tomorrow to break down the college football rankings, to break down early signing day. A lot of crazy stuff happening tomorrow, so we'll break it down tomorrow, and we'll see you then.